These were once beautiful cities and towns. They no longer exist. All the people who lived here are gone. Their homes were destroyed. All of this is the result of the war that Vladimir Putin started in the center of Europe. The war that has been going on for a year and a half. But do you know the craziest part? To this day, no one really understands why Putin started this war. What does he even want? Is he crazy or does he have a plan? And most importantly, can Putin actually win? Putin's war, as insane as it may seem to us, has its reasons and its logic. And those reasons are corruption and Putin's painful obsession with his own greatness. December 2021, Russia moves 170,000 soldiers to Ukraine's borders. They say it's just a military exercise, but it clearly isn't. Putin suddenly gives NATO an ultimatum. He demands they turn back time by 25 years. NATO must withdraw from Eastern Europe, he says. It must stop supporting the members it already accepted. Essentially, just reverse everything back to 1997. Was he for real?
Мы не увидели адекватного учета трех наших ключевых требований, касающихся недопущения расширения на НАТО.
Надули, просто нагло обманули.
Нас просто водили за нос, обманывали.
Take a look at these videos.
Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
This man, who loves to be seen as a confident, calm leader and a great geopolitical strategist, looks really irritated?
Грубо кинули, надули.
Actually, not just irritated, he's full of anger, hatred and envy.
Нас просто надули.
Цинично обманули.
Просто водили нас за нос. К сожалению, нас в очередной раз обманули.
Of course, Putin was not counting on any real results with this ultimatum. I don't think the Kremlin really expected that NATO would just go, all right, Vlad, we'll do whatever you want, welcome back to 1997. What Putin did is he basically flipped the chessboard, grabbed all the pieces and threw them all over the place, took out his Kalashnikov and started shooting around. He was like, you don't want to be friends with me? Well, I'm going to make you be friends with me. Let's see how you talk after we take Kiev in 3 days. Spoiler alert, we won't see that. Putin has long been living in an alternate reality, a really weird one. Here is my favorite example. Putin puts on a white jumpsuit, climbs into a hang glider and infiltrates a flock of Siberian cranes. He's their leader, the Alpha Crane, helping them find their way south, because they obviously can't figure it out themselves.
Президент поделился впечатлениями от роли вожака стаи стерхов.
Привыкли, не боятся.
I am still not sure what the message was here. I guess that Putin is smarter than the birds?
Молодцы. Здорово. Красивые ребята, симпатичные.
Or here is Vladimir Putin scuba diving in the place where the Crimean Bridge will be built in a few years. And, what luck, he accidentally finds some ancient Greek amphoras. Apparently, they have been on the bottom of the sea for thousands of years, but they shine as if they were taken out of a museum yesterday. Let's not even try to guess what the Kremlin PR team wanted to say with that. They probably just looked for an excuse to show Putin in a wetsuit. I mean, it's not the first time they did something like that.
Oh my!
Actually, it was all about the approval ratings. As ridiculous as it is, it really worked for a while. After the alcoholic, useless Yeltsin, there was finally some relief. Our president is no longer an embarrassing old man. He's athletic, he's strong. The Russian president is finally respected in the West. He is the force to be reckoned with. Oh, this golden era of Vladimir Putin. He really loved it. He is hanging out with world leaders, posing for pictures, having a blast. He even toys with the idea of Russia joining NATO one day. Inside Russia, Putin's public image was carefully curated. The recipe was simple. No independent media, lies, constant senseless praise, zero accountability, and bottomless budgets. All of that worked until it didn't.
It happens.
Take a look at this graph. It shows Putin's approval rating over the first 20 years of his rule. The numbers themselves are meaningless, they don't reflect the actual public support. But we're here to look at the overall trend. The war in Chechnya and Putin's promises to kill terrorists even in the toilet, yes, that's what he promised, is what brings Putin, an absolute no-name, to power. His approval ratings skyrocket to 84%. And it becomes a drug that Putin can't give up. He's obsessed with his own popularity. The FSB even created its own polling service just to get the perfect numbers. But in 2009, Putin's worst nightmare began. His rating kept dropping. His 2012 re-election, which was supposed to be a huge sensation, only made things worse. The biggest protest in modern history took place in Moscow. Putin's rating was at a historic low. That needed to be solved.
Time has come to change this.
So he captured Crimea. And it was a triumph, an absolute triumph. It didn't matter that it was illegal, that it was an annexation, that there would be sanctions and international isolation. Putin made Russia great again, if you know what I mean.
Make Russia great again.
But that euphoria didn't last long. Putin's ratings started dropping again. COVID, pension age increase, rising poverty, big problems that required big solutions. But what's the point in inventing new tricks when the old ones worked just fine? So Putin decided to take Kiev in 3 days.
Not a great plan.
It was meant to be a short, victorious war. Clean, smooth victory, Crimea 2.0. A new dose of imperial grandeur, flags, parades, and cheering crowds.
Putin, President! Mira!
Yes, Putin might have done a lot of things wrong, but this outweighs them all. That's what people were meant to feel. Remember this formula, it might become the reason why Putin's regime collapses one day. So why did Putin choose Ukraine for his big symbolic war? Well, there are several reasons. Ukraine has always been a thorn in Putin's side. It literally only causes him trouble. First of all, why on earth does our brotherly nation want to join the EU? That's annoying, isn't it? What about us? And they also dare to protest and get rid of corrupt rulers. They do revolutions, and they do them well. Jesus, no! Putin doesn't want Russians to see that this is actually possible. In fact, Putin has hated Ukraine his entire life. He, the president of the biggest country in the world, has always believed that Ukraine should not exist. It's not a real country for him. At some point, he started to say it out loud without holding back at all. We just weren't listening back then. He once said to Bush, "You must understand, George, that Ukraine is not even a state." What is Ukraine? Part of its territory is Eastern Europe, and part of it, a significant part, is a gift from us. He even threatened Bush that if Ukraine was admitted to NATO, it would cease to exist as a state. That was back in 2008, 15 years ago. What is Putin saying right now? The exact same thing, word to word.
Итак, начну с того, что современная Украина целиком и полностью была создана Россией. Точнее, большевистской, коммунистической Россией.
2 days after this video, he started the war. And after a year and a half of this 3-day war, Putin's view of the world still holds firm. And his cronies are playing along with his fantasies. Here is a recent video from the Kremlin. The head of the Constitutional Court came to visit Putin with a gift. The gift was a map, great choice, an old map from the 17th century. They showed on TV how he and Putin studied the map together with great interest and came to a shocking conclusion. It doesn't have Ukraine on it.
Really?
Really?
Case closed. Let's continue the war to eradicate this nonsense of a state.
Советская власть создала советскую Украину. Это хорошо известно. До этого никакой Украины не было в истории человечества.
Well, actually, the word Ukraine was right there on the map.
You just see what you want to see.
I mean, this really looks like a clinical compulsive disorder, an obsession of some sort, denial of reality. But despite Putin's obvious madness, there is still some cold calculation going on in his head. When you're planning something as big as an invasion of Europe's biggest country, you have to wait for the perfect moment, when the stars align. And they kind of did. The whole world is weakened by the pandemic. The US disastrously exits Afghanistan. They are unlikely to intervene in another crisis far away from home in the near future. Europe is dealing with Brexit, saying farewell to Merkel, and the EU depends on Russian gas more than ever. In Belarus, Putin's best buddy and fellow dictator Lukashenko managed to hold on to his throne against all odds. The Russian opposition is successfully mopped up. Some were killed, some were almost killed and then imprisoned. The independent media is shut down. Protest seems impossible. And there is a new president in Ukraine, a comedian.
Мы все говорим, Путин бессовестный пристал к Украине. Да может быть не случайно, потому что Украина красавица. Она ему просто нравится. И судя по его поведению, она ему нравится больше, чем Кабаева.
In Putin's eyes, this is a joke. Real presidents come from KGB.
Значит, вы уж меня извините, в туалете поймаем, мы и в сортире их замочим, в конце концов. Все, вопрос закрыт окончательно.
There are pro-Russian parties there in Ukraine, pro-Russian oligarchs. Putin's old-time friend Medvedchuk controls the media, and he is ready to become the new president of Ukraine. Tons of cash, billions of dollars perhaps, were poured into agent networks and bribes. They promise that when the day comes, all politicians, the army and the police will switch to the Russian side.
Для того, щоб усе це здійснити владі Зеленського, треба заткнути рота тим, хто несе людям правду. Сьогодні фашизм в нашій країні отримав свій колір зелений, но пасаран, фашизм не пройдет. И вы все погибнете, потому что вы дьявол, фашистский дьявол. Вставай, страна огромная.
And there is also Donbass. Russia has been waging a low-grade war there for 8 years. They give Russian passports to everyone there and feed them the magic pill, Russian TV.
Россия, матушка, забери Донбасс домой.
And most importantly, Vladimir Putin knows he will get away with anything. And that's the only thing that actually makes sense. He got away with annexing Crimea. The world just turned a blind eye to that one. Putin got away with shooting down passenger plane over Ukraine. He got away with the Salisbury poisonings. He got away with trying to kill Navalny. Deep concerns and a few meaningless sanctions are a small price to pay for all that.
Our deep concerns.
Mr. Biden said he has deep concerns.
We share the deep concern.
And of course, Putin was told that he was welcome in Ukraine, that the invincible Russian army will be greeted with flowers, that the weak Ukrainian regime will collapse in just a matter of days. Putin even decided to personally record an address to the Ukrainian military. That's how confident he was of his total success.
Берите власть в свои руки. Похоже, нам с вами будет легче договориться, чем с этой шайкой наркоманов и неонацистов, которая засела в Киеве и взяла в заложники весь украинский народ.
How is this possible? Simple. Putin lives in an echo chamber. It's hard to imagine, but Putin doesn't know how to use the internet. He doesn't know how to use the computer. He cannot even hold an iPhone. He learned everything about the world from classified folders that his secret services bring him. And, as it happens in all dictatorships, they only write what Putin wants to hear.
Потерь в вооруженных силах России нет.
It's an impenetrable bubble. Think about it. Where can he possibly get an alternative viewpoint? Googling is certainly not his strong suit. Reading a newspaper? They are all owned either by the government or by his friends. Same goes for the TV. It is all the same propaganda. Maybe a minister or an MP could whisper something to him, try to tell him the truth.
Российские войска продолжают уничтожать военные цели, наносить массированные высокоточные удары. При этом принимаются исчерпывающие меры по исключению гибели гражданского населения.
But who? There is not one opposition member in the Russian parliament.
Не нефть и газ. Наше преимущество Путин, и мы его должны защитить. Спасибо.
You need to be quarantined for 2 weeks to even meet with Putin. And even if it comes to a meeting, what are you going to say? That everything in the Russian army has been plundered? That all of its achievements are made up? Well, Putin will ask, quite reasonably, what the hell did I spend billions of dollars for? And then he will send you to jail, or perhaps even worse.
Video from the ground showing the jet's debris burning.
So here is the question. Can Vladimir Putin actually win the war? Well, the answer depends on how long the war is going to last. I'm very sorry for not being optimistic enough, but it's just how things are. Putin's main strategic ally is time. If the war drags on for years, exactly how Putin wants it, he will win through sheer exhaustion. He will buy enough time to put the country on a war footing. All factories and plants will work in 3 shifts and the war will become the national idea. Military aid to Ukraine will dry up eventually. NATO won't accept a country that is actively engaged in a war as its new member. And Ukrainians will keep getting killed until the end of days. So ideally, for Putin, this war should be eternal. It doesn't matter how many towns the Russian army captures or loses or how many people die. The lives of Russians are worthless for him. What matters is that Putin solves his main task. He stays in power for the rest of his life. I mean, how else could it be? Can you even imagine what Putin could hypothetically do after the war? Another pension reform? Building new roads? Dealing with climate change? No, for him, there is no way back to the good old days. But if this becomes a relatively quick war, Putin has little to no chance of winning it. Right now, Russia simply doesn't have enough soldiers on the current front line. It is 1,000 kilometers long and Russia needs at least 1 million soldiers to attack or even hold its positions. Currently, there are no more than 400,000. The equipment is outdated. They don't have time to invent anything new. There is constant evidence of so-called shell hunger, a permanent shortage of ammunition for tanks and artillery.
Вон автоматы получаем.
And there are sanctions, creating serious problems with supply chains. Meanwhile, Ukraine is guaranteed to keep getting new supplies, at least in the foreseeable future. If this doesn't change, there is a realistic possibility for them to take back all of their territories.
Ukraine needs weapon supplies. We need heavy artillery, armed vehicles, air defense systems, and combat aircraft.
And this is why military support for Ukraine is vital right now. Freezing the conflict for decades will not only lead to millions of ruined lives, it will be a disaster for the whole of Europe and the entire world. A catastrophe that would be unimaginable if one insane dictator from the KGB hadn't taken control of a huge country and started a war that only makes sense in his own head. At least this time, he shouldn't get away.